Hello and welcome to Business 360. I'm Shireen Bhan. The top stories that we're tracking for you this evening. A late sell-off on Dalal-Street as the Sensex and the Nifty end at the low point of the day. Financial stocks lead the decline. The Nifty drops below its 100-day moving average. The US and China avoid triple-digit tariffs on each other's goods, agree to extend the trade truce by another 90 days. US retailers get ready to ramp up inventories ahead of the holiday season at the end of the year. European leaders say Ukraine should have the freedom to decide its future ahead of the summit between President Trump and President Putin on the 15th of August. Trump appears to entertain the idea of giving away parts of Ukraine to Russia, sparking panic in Brussels. The Indian government considers a 4,000 crore rupee loan guarantee scheme for small businesses and exporters to cushion the blow from higher US tariffs. Banking sources say interest rates for MSMEs can be reduced if protected by government guarantees. Trump's tariffs dent Hindalco's US subsidiary Novelis in Q1. The company estimates a $60 million hit in Q2 as well. Hindalco's India business beats estimate as the company reduces its debt burden. Insurance regulator gets a whistleblower complaint alleging conflict of interest at Westbridge Capital. Sources say Westbridge is the promoter entity for both Star Health and Kiwi General Insurance. Current regulations do not permit one entity to be the promoter of two stream insurers. That's an exclusive. SamAltman hits back at Elon Musk after the Tesla CEO accuses Apple of favouring OpenAI on its App Store. Altman calls Musk's allegations remarkable and accuses him of promoting his own firms and ventures using his own social media platform, X. Israel's military continues to attack Gaza despite global outrage over the killing of 6 journalists. 5 more Palestinians, including 2 children, starved to death, raising the total number of hunger-related deaths to 227. Protests in Delhi and other parts of India after the Supreme Court ordered all stray dogs in the national capital region to be moved to shelters within 8 weeks. BJP leader and animal rights activist Maneka Gandhi says 70% of dog bites are caused by pet dogs and calls for a balanced approach to ensure safer streets. Well, let's go straight to the market action of the day. The Dalal-Street failing to hold on to opening hour gains, ending at the low point of the day. In fact, the Sensex and the Nifty ended nearly 0.5% lower today. The Nifty Bank closing about 1% lower almost, and the Nifty Mid-Cap lost about 150 odd points, 368 or 0.5% lower on the Sensex and the Nifty. 30 stocks ended in the red as financials dragged the markets lower. Prashant is standing by with the details. Prashant, what happened in the markets today?
Well, a bit of a reversal after yesterday's very, very strong close. Yesterday, the Nifty was up about 200 points. Today, it gave about 50% of those gains back. No real specific reason per se, no real news flow, but just, a bit of a drift which became sharper towards the end, the last 1 hour or so. The Nifty, Bank Nifty, Mid-Cap Index, all three ending down, nothing large, 0.25%, 1/3%. The Small-Cap Index managed, I think, a flattish kind of close, maybe even slightly higher. I'll start with what was down on the Nifty. Bajaj Finance, HUL and HDFC Bank were the 3 names which stood out with some profit booking. In terms of gains, you had Tech Mahindra, Hero MotoCorp and Maruti, which stood out. In the broader space, through the course of the day, there were more stocks higher than lower, but by close, it was almost exactly 1:1. And I'm talking about all NSE stocks here. In any case, I'll start with what was up. A lot of the smaller travel kind of names, Ixigo, Yatra, Travel Foods, these were all up sharply. Sonata Software was the #1 volume-led gainer today in the market. Again, no real reason per se, except the fact that the stock had corrected quite a bit. Jaiswal Neko came up with very large volume, small name again. Alchem, result reaction. Star Cement was higher sharply. Medi Assist cleared a block in the morning. And there was, of course, strong buying after that. And there was something like a car trade which stood out with some action as well. In terms of cuts, Astral reacting negatively to numbers. Marksons, something similar. Praj Industries, earnings reaction. You had Action Construction, 5% yesterday, 6% today. So it's taken a large knock. And by the way, the stock's not done anything for the last almost 2 years now. Sirma, sharply lower. Man Industries, Kajaria, Aether Energy, about 5.5% cut coming through as well. So a bit of a pause after what looked like a pretty good start to this week. 2 more days before, of course, we run into that Friday market holiday. Today is important because we get inflation numbers in India. And then, of course, out of the US, you get inflation numbers out of the US as well, which I reckon from a overall market perspective will be the bigger one to watch out for tomorrow.
Well, Prashant, on cue, the India numbers in retail inflation for the month of July easing to 1.55%. That's the lowest reading in 8 years. Food prices were contracted, hitting the lowest level in 6 years. Latha standing by to decode the inflation fine print for us. Latha, good news clearly on the inflation front.
Well, good news, but the surprising word I'm going to use is that it is higher than expected. Our own poll expected 1.3. So although 1.55 looks ridiculously low for an India inflation number, the poll had actually thrown up 1.3. But to be fair, there was a wide, there was quite a range. There were two people actually, SBI and Citi, two very prominent economists who were expecting as low as 1.1. So that dragged the average down. Even otherwise, my average would have been 1.4. So you will have to say that the July inflation number has come in slightly higher than what the street expected. There were some numbers floating around at 1.7, but those were few and far between. Almost everyone was at 1.4 at best. So this is a bit of a surprise, you will say. And food inflation perhaps is the one that surprised a bit. The number that I had was minus 2%. It's actually come in at minus 1.7%. So perhaps that's why the number is slightly higher. The headline number is slightly higher than what we thought. What's been dragging down food have been the two heavyweights, cereals and pulses. They're falling even month on month, mind you. Usually during the monsoon months, you start seeing these food prices rise because of dislocation of, movement of goods. But nothing of that kind because of the excellent monsoon, early monsoon. We have actually had a salutary impact on food inflation expectations. That's also keeping food prices down. So you're seeing these two heavyweights, cereals and pulses, down month on month. Cereals is down 0.1% month on month and pulses is down a whole 1% month on month. But let's look at the year-on-year figures, which is, the correct way of looking at it because this is a seasonally adjusted product. Cereals are up 3% on the year. But the most important point to note is that edible oils are up 19%. That's the carry forward of the higher tariffs that were imposed. Fruit and vegetables, again, are down 20% year on year. That's because last year we had very high prices for potatoes and onions. And that explains why the inflation numbers have been coming so much lower in year-on-year terms at 1.5%, as you just saw. The other important number I should point out is the non-food, non-fuel inflation, core inflation, has come in at 4.1% compared to 4.4 last month. Last month, in June, it was 4.4. This month, July, it's coming in at 4.1. That's also because the base effect is wearing out. The base was very low for core inflation in the first half of the year. That is, 2024 had 3% core inflation up until June, and then it starts picking up a bit. So that's why we are seeing core inflation come down. But there have also been global prices, Asian prices of some metals falling, and that could be having an impact, a mild impact on our core inflation as well. Core inflation is also services inflation in our case, and some of that is also going down. So all told, the inflation number at 1.5% is mildly higher than what we expected, but well in line with what the RBI is saying. RBI has brought down the full year forecast from the earlier 3.7 to 3.1. So this 1.55 gels very well with the RBI's expectation. This will perhaps push yields higher. It bolsters what the Reserve Bank told us on August 6th. It didn't give us much of a hope that there will be yet another rate cut. For the bond markets, bond yields have already picked up. They are now 10-year is at 6.46. I think we should pull up the 10-year yet again. It's reacting very harshly to the numbers because from the word go, from August 6th, when Reserve Bank indicated that it is not in any dovish mood, the yields have been picking up. A further reason why it's picking up is fiscal deficit. Because the nominal inflation, nominal GDP is expected to be low, there are fears that the fiscal deficit will be high. The fiscal deficit is expected to be higher than the 4.4 estimated by the budget. Also because tax collections may be lower, given the uncertainty on the tariff front and the generally lower consumption and investment that is expected from the private sector. All told, bond markets in India are in the dumps, as you can see. 6.47 now as we speak. The lowest that the 10-year saw was, imagine, 6.17 in end May, when we were expecting, inflation to come down and a generally good tariff situation as well. No such luck. At the moment, it's 30 basis points higher than the low about 2 months back. So, well, not a very, it's a good inflation number, but not much cheer for the bond market. Even this good inflation number, we will celebrate for 2 hours. After that, we are going to focus on the US CPI numbers. That's ruling the roost.
All right, Lata, we'll take that 2-hour celebration for now. But thanks very much for joining us. In fact, Lata will be joined by economists in less than 30 minutes to analyze the numbers for us. But the big story that's moving the markets worldwide: President Trump has extended the trade truce with China till the middle of November, just hours before the previous truce deadline was set to expire. This, of course, was expected. Now, President Trump wrote on social media, and I quote, "I've just signed an executive order that will extend the tariff suspension on China for another 90 days. All other elements of the agreement will remain the same," end of quote. China's Commerce Ministry has also confirmed the extension, saying Beijing is suspending additional tariffs on US goods for another 90 days. It's also postponing its decision on restricting trade and investment with some American companies during this period. As per their previous agreement, Chinese goods will continue to face 30% tariffs in the US, while US goods will face 10% tariffs in China. The pause averts the triple-digit tariffs and buys time for the world's two largest economies to work out a trade deal. Now, China has urged local companies to avoid using Nvidia's H20 processors, this according to a Bloomberg report. Now, these are the semiconductors used largely by AI companies. The advisory from the Chinese government complicates the plan of Nvidia to maintain revenue growth in China. Now, Beijing's move also comes after an unprecedented agreement between chip makers and the White House, where both Nvidia and AMD agreed to pay a 15% cut to the US government from their sales in China. Both Nvidia and AMD have agreed to this deal. It's not clear if China has issued any advisory asking companies to avoid AMD semiconductors just yet. Now, President Trump has praised Intel CEO Lip-Bu Tan just days after publicly calling for his resignation over his alleged ties to Chinese chip companies. Now, President Trump's remarks come after he met Intel CEO along with Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick and Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent. Trump wrote on social media, and I quote, "His success and rise is an amazing story. Mr. Tan and my cabinet members are going to spend time together and bring suggestions to me during the next week," end of quote. Intel officials said that CEO Tan had a constructive discussion with the president on Intel's commitment to strengthen US technology and manufacturing leadership. So another U-turn there by President Trump. The other big global story: 26 member states of the European Union have issued a joint statement in support of Ukraine ahead of the meeting between Presidents Trump and Putin on Friday. The statement welcomed President Trump's efforts towards ending the Ukraine war. However, the leader said that the path for peace cannot be decided without Ukraine. Putin's ally, Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban, is the only leader who did not endorse the statement. Speaking to reporters at the White House, President Trump said he could know within 2 minutes of meeting Putin whether progress was possible or not. Trump also claimed they will discuss land swapping in the summit in Alaska, expressing frustration over Ukraine's President Zelensky's insistence that the country would need to hold a national referendum on any peace deal. Zelensky has also rejected the idea that Ukraine must commit to give up land to secure a ceasefire. And President Trump has also said the 50% tariff threat on India is a big blow to Moscow. Trump said that India is the second largest oil buyer from Russia and the higher tariffs will hurt both economies. Here's President Trump.
They have tremendous potential in Russia to do well. They're not doing well. Their economy is not doing well right now because it's been very well disturbed by this. It doesn't help when the President of the United States tells their largest or second largest oil buyer that we're putting a 50% tariff on you if you buy oil from Russia. That was a big blow. And then they say, gee, he wasn't so tough. Nobody else would have done that.
Well, that's President Trump. Now, back home, the government is considering a 4,000 crore rupee loan guarantee scheme for small businesses and exporters to cushion the blow from higher US tariffs. We learned from banking sources that interest rates on MSMEs can be reduced if protected by government guarantees. Abhimanyu standing by with the details. Abhimanyu, what is being discussed at this point in time? What could the likely proposal be?
Even as the threat of around 50% duty on Indian exports of labor-intensive products in the footwear and textile segment looms large on India's exports to the United States, industry sources have indicated that a relief package is in the works from the government side. It is expected that the government is going to allocate around rupees 4,000 crores to banks to provide relief to small exporters having a turnover of less than 500 crores. The proposal will involve 10 to 15% credit guarantee to banks to advance loans to small exporters to help them tide over the current situation, even as both the sides remain engaged in negotiations for a bilateral trade agreement. Now, currently, the Commerce Ministry has submitted before the Parliament that as of now, there is 25% duty which has been imposed on India's merchandise exports to the United States, which impact 55% of India's overall merchandise exports, particularly in the footwear and textile segment. Also, there is a 25% additional ad valorem duty, which is expected to come into effect from the 27th of August. It remains to be seen how early both the sides are going to explore a joint resolution or some degree of arrangement as far as ensuring tariff stability is concerned, even as negotiations are still continuing between both the sides. A combination of factors like product differentiation, demand, quality, contractual arrangements are going to determine the impact of reciprocal tariffs on India's exports, including exports from the textile sector. That is the word which has been given by the Commerce Ministry before the Parliament, even as both the sides remain engaged in negotiations.
Abhimanyu, many thanks. On to earnings now. US President Trump's tariffs have dented the performance of Hindalco's US subsidiary Novelis in the first quarter. The company estimated revenues in the second quarter will also take a $60 million hit on account of tariffs. However, Hindalco's India business beating estimates as the company continued to cut its debt burden. Nigel is here with more on Hindalco's performance. Nigel.
Well, that's right. Hindalco was in focus all of today's trading sessions because you had overnight Novelis that came out with a set of numbers, which was actually disappointing. And then you had the India business that reported its numbers that actually was very, very good. Let's focus on the Novelis piece, which is clearly being getting hit by these tariffs. So if you look at the EBITDA per ton, it came in at around $432 per ton. The street was bracing for a number in the vicinity of around $450 per ton. Tariff impact, yes, that played out. The management had highlighted that it could be to the tune of around $40 million on a quarterly run rate. Well, for the first quarter, they got hit by around $28 million. They're saying for the second quarter, going by the current tariffs at around 50%, they could possibly get hit by around $60 million in quarter two itself. And they're saying that if in case these tariffs are fixed at around 25% and 50%, then the impact will be at around $40 million to around $60 million on a quarterly basis. So that clearly is telling you that these tariffs are hurting them. The management, though, they are confident. They are saying that they're calling out bottoming out of the EBITDA and they're expecting things to recover from here on. How is that? Because they're looking at mitigating this impact. They're focusing on the cost side, which could result in savings of close to around $100 million. We'll have to see how that goes, but that number they have up from around $75 million to around $100 million on. Capital expenditure, they're not pulling back. They're talking about roughly around $2 billion for this year itself. So for Hindalco, Novelis was a miss, though the commentary suggests that things could improve from here on. On the India business, no worries though. Aluminium business, excellent numbers out there. The EBITDA number came in much better than what we were working with. And the aluminium, both the upstream as well as the downstream businesses, on a per ton basis, there's a big growth. On the upstream business, there's a growth of close to around 15%, while on the downstream business, it was 92% higher. So both those two looked good. Copper business as well was a pleasant surprise. So from an estimate of close to around 600 crores odd, they came in 10% higher at around 670 crores. The TCRCs have been a little bit weakish, but they got higher realizations from sulfuric acid. So both those two segments did well. And, even though Novelis' debt has moved up, in the consolidated entity, the net debt has come down marginally. So it's a tale of two halves. Novelis is struggling a little bit because of the tariffs, but the India business continues to do quite well.
Nigel, many thanks. Now, China has eased curbs on urea shipments to India, according to a Bloomberg report. This is another indication of a thaw in the tensions between Beijing and New Delhi, and President Trump's trade policies targeting both nations. India is the world's largest importer of urea, which is used as a fertilizer. China is a major exporter of the nitrogen-based fertilizer, but it has restricted sales in recent years. We will head into a break, but up next, SamAltman hits back at Elon Musk after Tesla's CEO accuses Apple of favouring OpenAI on its App Store. That and more when we return. In international headlines, at least 89 Palestinians, including 31 aid seekers, have been killed in attacks by Israel across Gaza in the past 24 hours. 5 more Palestinians, including 2 children, have starved to death in the enclave. According to Gaza's health ministry, the total number of hunger-related deaths now stands at 227. Palestinians held funerals for the 5 Al Jazeera journalists who were killed by Israeli forces in Gaza. This as protesters rallied in the streets of West Bank against the killings. Protests have also erupted globally, with journalists demanding accountability for the attacks. The Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese has accused Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu of living in denial over the suffering of Palestinians in Gaza. His statements came a day after he announced that Australia will recognise Palestine as a separate state. Similar moves were made by the UK, France and Canada. The Australian Prime Minister said that Australia wants the killing and cycle of violence to end. OpenAI CEO Sam Altman has hit back at Elon Musk after the Tesla CEO accused Apple of favouring OpenAI on its App Store. Altman has called Musk's allegations remarkable, accusing him of promoting his own firms and ventures using his own social media platform, X. Rachna joins us now to tell us more about the recent war for AI's global dominance. Rachna, so it's Musk versus Altman, with Apple crossed in the crossfire.
Apple could soon be dragged into the latest and perhaps most personal chapter of the AI wars. Elon Musk is accusing the tech giant of stacking the App Store in favor of OpenAI, calling it an unequivocal antitrust violation and vowing legal action from his AI startup XAI. But here's the reality check. On Apple's productivity chart, OpenAI's ChatGPT isn't number 1. That spot goes to Perplexity AI. ChatGPT sits at number 2. Google's Gemini is at 6 and Musk's own Grok trails at number 11. On ratings, Grok matches ChatGPT's 4.8 stars, but with 1.37 lakh reviews compared to ChatGPT's 6.23 lakh, a far deeper user base is reflected here. So is this really about Apple's algorithm or about Musk's frustration that his app is still far behind? That's the question. But Sam Altman also tried hitting back, calling Musk's claim remarkable given what he has heard about Musk allegedly using X to promote his own ventures. He also accused Musk of sidelining competitors and targeting people he does not like. Altman said he even hopes for counter-discovery in court when the legal action is taken, saying that many would love to see what surfaces out of it. It's a rare moment where antitrust, App Store visibility and personal grudges are all colliding, and Apple may find itself in the firing line, whether or not it's the real cause of the problem. So we will be keeping an eye out for it.
All right, Rachna, many thanks for joining us. And with that, it is time for us to wrap up this edition of Business 360. The news will continue right here on CNBC TV 18. Stay tuned. We're back in a moment with a lot more.